Hey, guess what? I actually have a Twitter now. Come and follow me at Procrasturbate on Twitter. There you'll see some of the updates from the channel, including any of the tech stuff that I'm working on right now. Otherwise, I still have all of my other social media, including Facebook and Let's Procrastinate on Instagram. Hope to see you there. Hey, it's Ads. Welcome back. This is part 2 of the GameCube repair video. If you haven't seen part 1, I suggest you hit the link. It's in the description. It'll also be somewhere. And check that video out before we go on. Last time we pulled the GameCube apart. We retro-brighted it. Didn't go quite as well as I hoped. And in this part, what we're going to do is we're going to be installing the PicoBoot mod chip based on the Raspberry Pi. What we're going to do first is we're going to replace the clock battery in the console. Unfortunately, that thing is dead. It is also soldered to the controller port board, which is a little bit annoying. But what we can do is we can remove that battery and replace it with a little CR2025 holder, which is what I'm going to do. I'm also going to be replacing the LED light because I'm not really that big a fan of the orange. I'm going to replace it with a red light because I think it looks just a little bit smarter on the console. But you can pretty much replace it with whatever colour that you like. So, let's get to it. The clock battery sits here on the controller port board, as does the light for the power. Firstly, I'm going to add a bit of fresh solder just to make it a bit easier to get this off. Then I'm going to use my tweezers as I solder just to try and pry this little battery off. Now that's removed, clean up the pads using a bit of solder braid. I'll fit the new battery holder in its place and solder this bad boy on. Alright, now onto the LED. Again, a bit of fresh solder. Then use my tweezers just to pull it off as I hit it with the soldering iron. Clean up those pads. And get the new LED into place. Just solder into place. And cut off the leads. That's all done. Alright, so the battery holder's in and the LED has been replaced. So the next thing we need to do is we need to prepare our PicoPi by downloading the software onto it. So I will show you through that now. It's a very easy process. All you need is a little USB cable to connect to it and an internet connection, which you must have since you're watching this video. So let's get to it. So you want to boot your PicoPi into download mode. What you do is you press this little boot select button and hold it down while you're connecting it to your computer. Once you do that, it'll show up as a USB stick on your computer. So what you want to do is you want to go to the PicoBoot GitHub page, which I will link in the description. Then you want to look for releases and select the latest release. Under assets, look for picoboot.uf2. Once you've done that, open up your Pico on your computer and drag the file over that you just downloaded. Once the file finishes transferring, the Pico will automatically disconnect from your computer. Once it disconnects, it's all programmed and it's ready to go. Alright, so the PicoPi is now ready to go with PicoBoot. Next, we're going to solder it onto the board. I suggest that you learn from my mistakes. I used a way too long cable, which the person who actually developed the PicoBoot solution pointed out to me on Twitter when I posted my photos of my job that I was so proud of and didn't boot the first time. So keep in mind the cable that you will see being soldered on today is way too long. You want about no more than 10 centimeters. I would also suggest, rather than using a sheathed cable, use separate individual strands of cable and then get some heat shrink to hold those cables together, or even, some electrical tape, something like that. I did manage to squeeze it in there without any problems, but I did have to bend a piece of metal to get it to stay in there. So, as I said, I will point it out, but just remember, the cable that you're going to see is too long. I did fix that off camera. So, let's get to it. Alright, so I'm going to get these wires ready by removing some of the insulation and pre-tinning them. Now, for this, you actually need a total of 5 wires. 2 are going to go to one of the little chips on your board, and another 3 are going to go to some solder joints. Depending on which revision of the board that you have will depend on where these chips and these solder points are located. I've got the older revision, the DOL001, so that's what you'll be seeing today. Now, that particular revision is the one that has the digital port. The newer revision does not have a digital output on it. Detailed instructions are available off the GitHub page for this project for PicoBoot. I'm going to put a link in the description, so if you do want to see those detailed instructions, you can go straight there. I'm using coloured cables for each of the connections just to make it a bit easier for me. And I'm going to use the same colours, or at least as close as I can, to what's in this picture, just to make it a little bit easier. On screen now are all the pins that you need to connect to on the motherboard using your wires. You'll notice for the ground connector, you actually want to bridge 2 pins at the same time, so just bear that in mind when you're doing your soldering. Now you get to watch me fumble as I try and solder this stupid thing. The blue wire I'm going to connect to pin 5. Just remember, when counting pins on ICs, you count them counterclockwise, starting from the pin above the clock notch. The peach wire will then go onto pin 9. Yes, peach. Now we're going to connect the black wire to the ground pin, and we're also going to be shorting another pin, so remember to check that diagram before you do this bit. Now to do the pink pin, although in this case I'm using white since there isn't a pink cable in this. Again, refer to the diagram. And last but not least, the red cable on to the 3.3 volt pin. Now to just tidy up some of these excess wires so they don't get in the way or short anything out. Now we're going to prepare the cables at the other end so we can get them into the Pico Pi. So the red wire you want to go to the 3-volt pin on your Pico Pi. The black wire goes to one of your ground pins. The orange lead you need to bridge to pins GP6 and 7. Pink, or in this case white, will go to GP5. Now that we've done that, I'm going to use a bit of isopropanol alcohol just to give this board a bit of a scrub and a clean. Now the board's looking nice and clean again, I'm going to put some fresh thermal pads onto the board and replace the heatsink so I can give it a test. Now keep in mind, this thing takes 3 different sized thermal pads, which is kind of annoying if you're trying to buy them all in bulk. What you need is 1.5mm for the GPU, the biggest silvery chip on the board. You need 2mm for the CPU, the one with IBM on it. And you need 1mm for both of the RAM chips, those 2 black chips there. Now don't use thermal paste because all you'll do is crush the thermal paste and it'll end up a big glob of mess everywhere that may not work properly and will certainly be something you have to clean up. Alright, so I'll cut the 1.5mm piece to size for the GPU and stick it on top there. Next up, the 2mm piece for the CPU. And then measure up the 1mm pieces for the 2 RAM chips. Once they're all stuck down, I'll remove the plastic film off all of these. Don't forget to do that. And I'm going to squeeze the heatsink on top just so I can give this a test boot. Before putting the heatsink on, you may want to consider putting a little bit of tape over the solder joints on the little IC chip, just to prevent any shorts. Now, I didn't do this because I forgot, but I was lucky enough that it didn't actually short out. For testing, you'll need to have your SD card ready with Swiss on it, as well as the little power converter board and your controller ports. So connect all of those together. Connect the power supply up as well as all of your cables, and you should be good to test. Now, as I said earlier, a little note here, Mine didn't work the first time because this grey cable here is way too long. Off camera, I did resolder it and shorten that cable to just under 10 centimeters. So just remember that when you're doing this yourself. So PicoBoot is now in place. As I said before, I did, make a correction off camera. It is now a much shorter cable. So what we want to do next is, or at least I want to do next, is I want to replace the fan. I want to replace it with a Noctua fan. Unfortunately, they don't do a 50mm fan like I wanted, or at least I couldn't get my hands on one. So I'm going with a 40mm. Somebody online has actually created a 3D printout adapter to modify the 50mm shroud to a 40mm fan. I'll leave a link in the description of where I got that from, so you can print it out yourself if you want. But yeah, it was an easy enough swap. I'll show you how to do that now. I've got myself a 40x10mm Noctua fan, and this particular one is the 3-wire model. So I'll just go ahead and unpack this. I'm just going to go ahead and screw it onto my 3D printed mount. If you're after one of these, there's a link in the description to where you can 3D print one of these. The person that made this also sells them on their website. If you don't have a 3D printer, you can just purchase it through there. The link will be in the 3D printed file page. And I believe they also sell it with a 3-wire to GameCube adapter, so make your life a little bit easier. Anyway, I'll go ahead and screw this on. Once it's screwed on, we want to screw it into the existing mount where the fan originally lived. So let's do that. Don't forget to poke the wire out, otherwise you're going to have a bit of trouble later on. Now that that's in there, what you need to do is you need to connect 2 of the 3 wires for the fan onto the existing pin header for the old fan. Now, unfortunately, my camera must have died because I don't have any footage of me doing this, but in simple terms, all I did is cut the existing wire down on the Noctua fan, cut the end off the original fan, leaving a bit of cable there so I could solder onto it. I connected the red wire from the fan into the grey wire of the original fan harness, and then black to black. After that's done, all we have to do is connect it all up. Simples. Alright, so fan is done, battery's done, LED is done, mod chip's done. That really leaves us with one thing to do. That is reassemble the thing. So, as I think I said in my previous video, I can't remember now, I accidentally left 2 screws out plus a couple of little metal thingies. It doesn't seem that it's a problem, but learn from my mistake. Yeah, you can use this as instructions on how to reassemble it 99.9%. But yeah, just remember I did accidentally leave a few parts, so yeah, be warned, that's all. But let's put it back together and see if everything is working after that. Rather than bore you to death by making you sit through me reassembling this, And because I didn't do it right anyway, I would probably suggest going back to my previous video and basically reversing the process that I took to put it back together. Anyway, here is a very, very sped up view of me putting it back together. Feel free to skip ahead. Alrighty, we are done and the console is ready to play. So I can fire up some games, fire up Swiss, and actually use the damn thing, which I don't think I've used properly in a long time. Really happy with the way that it turned out, other than the retro bright not being perfect. As I said, missed out on putting some parts back into it, which doesn't seem to have been a problem. It still all sits together perfectly fine. I'm not going to pull it apart again just yet, just to fix those 2 screws. It's just not worth the effort. Unfortunately, I can't find any of my good controllers. I've just got this cheap piece of junk, again off Amazon. It's fine for the amount that I'm playing it at the moment. I'm fine with it for the time being. But other than that, it boots first time. I'm still able to play my CD games if I want to. If there's no SD card, the console just boots up like it's not modded at all. Otherwise, I can play all of my favourite ISOs straight from the SD card, which is great. So it means I can play a whole bunch of games that I've either destroyed over time or weren't able to pick up in my own region. Anyway, I hope you guys got something out of this. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos by me, hit the subscribe button. If you didn't like it, you know what to do. Hopefully see you next time.